I think the idea of like a positive feminine leader is something that most of us growing up don't really understand.
I abused myself, and that's what I attracted. That's what I allowed for all the other people in my life, was to further abuse me. And I set that standard for myself and allowed it, so it was just like a magnet to attract all of that kind of energy.
I became the people pleaser, the self-abandoning person, and getting into codependent relationships with other toxic people. That's how the toxic masculine wounded me.
And I truly see the wounded child in the toxic masculine, and I truly see the wounded child in toxic feminine, and they're both reactions to the other. And the answer is compassion, not judgment, not, evil this, evil that. The answer is compassion. Everybody really just needs a hug, y'all.
Toxic masculinity. And that would come through me and then come blasting out at my brother, where I needed to dominate him and I needed to belittle him and make him be the butt of all my jokes. Oh my gosh. Hey everybody. Welcome. By the way, this is a little satellite studio of Big Love Yoga Barn. So let's all put hippie snaps together for Big Love Yoga Barn and everything that's happening over there. And let's all put hippie snaps together for you all showing up tonight for purposes of healing and expanding our individual and collective consciousness. Oh my God, that just sounds so exciting. Right?
You almost sound like a professional.
I'm a professional, non-paid spiritual enthusiast. Hey, let's everybody go around the room and have just a brief little intro of your name and why it is that you came to such an event tonight. Maybe it was the topic itself. Maybe it's just spirituality in general. What was it about coming here tonight that you can share? Let's start with you, guy in the red shirt.
Hello, my name's Dizzy, and I think I'm going to say what brought me here today was compassion for myself.
Wow. Oh, that deserves a round of applause. Okay, Miss, who are you?
I'm Heather, and I came because I usually enjoy these events. I feel like I learn a lot from them. So I just wanted to listen and learn.
Was there anything in particular about tonight's topic that attracted you? Because you come all the time. Anyway, you'd come if there was no topic.
Yeah. True. This topic, I don't know how I feel about it. So I don't I feel like I couldn't say anything about it of value, so I don't know anything enough about it. So I just wanted to learn more.
Okay. Yeah.
We'll get some ideas tonight.
Absolutely. Guy in the back.
Yes.
Way back there.
So my name is Sharam, and the reason why I'm here is because every time I come to some of these events, I tend to learn a little bit more about myself. I tend to realize that there's a lot more commonality between us, different parts, but the lesson learned is about the same thing. So it's a commonality, and just trying to see what else, finding my blind spots in this area.
Totally. Mm-hmm. We're all just doing this human thing down here, trying to figure this shit out.
Oh.
I'm Lara, and Stacia invited me, so I'm here. But I saw the topic, and it's something I have been studying for a few years, so I'm always interested to hear other people's perspectives, because I find that's where I learn the most, is hearing others versus the reading or Googling or whatever else I have done.
In what way are you studying it?
I mean, I'm living, so I feel like every day I study it a little more, but I've been reading a lot. I've been asking a lot of different questions as it relates to that, but I think there's just a general awareness in the past few years that I have of this need for a better balance, because I've recognized there's quite the imbalance within myself.
Oh.
And which
Okay.
one has been more contentious for you, the toxic masculine or the toxic feminine?
Probably the masculine, because there's less of an understanding, just obviously so.
Mm-hmm. Hope you'll
Mm.
share some of that with us tonight.
I think I already did.
All right, and
Stacia. So I've seen these events before, and I just I wasn't in the right headspace to be part of it yet. And as I've kind of been working on my own spirituality and my own growth over the last year, especially, it was just the right time. And this topic's also very meaningful to me. I think doing a lot of the balancing work and trying to get back into my own femininity and what that means to me. And also bringing a friend makes it easier. So
yeah,
we'll talk about into that. So yeah,
you can be spiritually healing buddies.
exactly.
Check.
All right.
Right. I'm Dane. I've been to these for most of the ones since we started recording them.
Mm-hmm.
Really enjoyed them. And this one I'm really looking forward to because all this is pretty new ways of thinking for me. So be excited to hear what other people have to say and how it relates to what I feel. So yeah, this one's looking pretty cool.
Nice. All right, moving right along.
Yes. Hi.
My bucket hat sister.
Even indoors. Yeah, I'm Jalika. What are the things? Why am I here?
Yeah.
Yeah, I loved the last one we did on anger. That was amazing and very enlightening to hear and also share at the same time. That was really cool. And yeah, I think community is so important and connecting is so important, especially now. So this is great. I'm glad to be here.
Wow, you sound like a spiritual expansion ambassador. Thanks. I'm gonna have to give you some cards to pass out. That's good.
Make some bucket hats.
Teamwork.
Spiritual expansion bucket hats.
Official merch.
You're welcome.
Bingo. All right. Thank you for that contribution. We'll make use of it.
You're in charge of the Shopify.
Chris.
Hello, I am Chris. I come to these events periodically. Candidly, there are some that I've avoided in the past because they spoke to me so deeply I didn't think I'd be able to talk about them. I'm here at this one for no particular reason other than I just like to come here, and everybody I meet here is pretty cool, and I learn something every time I come.
I love it.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah.
My name is Holly, and I would be here no matter which topic because I love spiritual topics and talking about them. But this one I particularly like because, like you were saying, I've been on a journey to get back in touch with my divine feminine energy because I do believe there was a time in my past where I slipped into a masculine energy to protect myself, I believe.
Yeah.
And now I've been on this journey to reconnect back with the feminine. Getting there. I've had in my
Beautiful.
life displayed both wounded and feminine and wounded masculine, both, so I'm on that journey too. Yeah. And I
Love
like
it.
coming here because of the community aspect of it and meeting other like-minded people to talk to and on the spiritual path. I just don't feel like I meet many people in real life, in my regular life, because this is real life. I mean, regular life. So I like coming to these events and meeting you guys.
That's why I knew you'd take
Thanks.
to it like a
Oh,
duck to
no.
water.
Yeah.
He's my neighbor, and he just already knew that I was into this stuff. And he was like, "You have got to come to these things."
Yeah.
So-
And Dane is another spiritual expansion ambassador. Thank you, sir. We appreciate your recruitment.
Recruiter, yeah.
he recruited me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, buddy.
I'll go. My name's Connor. I came to the first podcast my first version of the podcast last time was anger. And I think that when I first saw about this one, it had the title of toxicity. But then after looking into it, I'm seeing feminine and masculine. And now I'm starting to realize how it's all very much related. And there's been some things that have happened since the eclipse that have been somewhat of a purge of this. So I want to understand it more.
Wow. Okay. It sounds like you're sharing this evening then.
Very curious.
All right. Yeah. You had some really great stuff the last time, and appreciate you stepping up and allowing everybody to participate in your life. Yo, bud, over there.
I am Satek Ananda, and I'm here because this is the most valuable thing I can do with my time, is creating genuine community for people to be real and authentic with each other. And the topic doesn't really matter. That's just an excuse to get y'all to come, But we're always pleasantly surprised with the depths of what the topic reveals. So this should be a fun one.
Yeah. Toxic masculinity and femininity. We've all been involved in receiving those negative energies, as well as exuding those energies as well. But we're also going to talk about the flip side of that too. Whenever we talk about negative things, it's great to accentuate it with the positive. So and for us to really understand what something that is negative, we have to have the positive alternative to compare it to. So we have a full, well-rounded understanding of both sides of it. My name is Jason Kearse. I am here to create spiritual expansion. I do this through learning myself, through listening to audio books and watching YouTube videos and having plant-based medicine journeys and interacting with all kinds of other people here on this planet. This is how I learn how to expand my own consciousness, and doing that, I love to help everything else. When any one person does it, they are adding that to the collective, and we are all gaining it, even though it may not seem like it. And there are plenty of knuckle draggers around there to prove that. We're still when we learn something new, we help everybody else too, and that's what it really fuels my heart and desire and passion to share. Thank you. Let's go ahead and get the rules and see how we go from here.
Rules?
Or guidelines, more like, I guess.
Rules? Who the fuck wants rules, Greetings, everyone. This is what we call Soul Sauce. And this format has been created based on many, many years of shamanic ceremonies and what makes them work. And the most important element in any ceremony is what we call integration. And it's when everybody comes together and shares everything they can from a very centered, very vulnerable place. And everyone listens really deeply. And really profound things happen because we don't have many places where we are allowed to speak honestly and vulnerably. And we don't have many spaces where people give us their undivided attention, do we? So when you find a place where you have people's undivided attention and they really honor and respect whatever you need to share, it changes people. And this group and this gathering was my attempt to bring the power of that integration experience out of a shamanic ceremony, because not everybody has the time or money or proclivity to have that experience. But we can simulate the power of integration by just all right now deciding that we're all here to listen to each other and just accept what each other has to share. This isn't a place to judge anybody. It's not a place to argue. It's not a place for politics. This is a place to just accept everybody's truth, because we can only express it as well as we can express it. You know what I'm saying? And the key is to know that when you come up, and we hope that you will come up, it's not as scary as it looks, I promise. Pardon me. It's not as scary as it looks. When you come up and sit in what we call the share chair. I got to get a sign built for it too. Right. You are invited to put on
a blindfold, which might make it scarier for you. It might not, but if you do it, you'll realize that it's there for a reason. Gets you out of your head, and it puts you in a place where you can share what you're feeling and what you're thinking, because you're not as distracted by all the neurons that process visual information when you're looking at everything. So you understand your own thoughts better and you express yourself better. And you don't have to, but I always invite the listeners to close their eyes as well, because if you do close your eyes, you will listen deeper. And the invitation is to do what we call listening between the lines, like reading between the lines. Not all of the information that's conveyed comes through words or even sound. There's a lot of information that comes in between the words and in between the sounds. And with your eyes, you'll start to feel that information as well. And just know there's no right or wrong answer, and there's no bar that you're trying to hit to come up, and there's no prize to win. It's just a space to tap into your authentic self, right? And that's all the invitation is. And nobody knows what the fuck they're gonna say until you start saying stuff. And once you start saying stuff, you'll realize it's not that hard. And we love everything you share. And don't worry about all the recording stuff. If you share something that's too vulnerable, let us know and we'll cut you out. You don't have to be in any of this, and nobody's signed a form, so we can't do anything with it without your permission. Don't let this stop you from being real and vulnerable with us, because we're here for the vulnerability. The media recording just came as an afterthought of like, wow, this is awesome. People would enjoy hearing this. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So welcome. The rules are very simple. Just share whatever you can about the topic from whatever place that you're comfortable sharing it. And if you're listening, listen with depth, listen with meditative focus and intention. And then remember that this is really just a spiritual support group. So we're all here to support each other and understanding ourselves, just a little bit more. I am complete. Any thoughts, any questions? All right, let's get started then. Let's get started. So what we do sometimes is we go around and each person takes a turn, or sometimes we have you raise your hands. When we ask people to raise their hands, very often we don't get a lot of hands. So I'm going to give you guys an opportunity. Is anybody that wants to jump in the share chair? All right, then we'll go around the circle. Oh, okay. All right. While Dizzy's getting ready up into the share chair, I'd like to just let everybody know, maybe remind them that masculine energy is had by both male and female sexes. Feminine energy is had by both male and female sexes. Each sex and variation of sex has these energies within them to varying degrees. Everything is on a scale. So if you're high in feminine energy, then you can still have masculine energy, but it's on the lower side of the spectrum, and then vice versa. So have that in mind. It's not masculine and feminine energy isn't assigned to one particular sex. Everybody has these energies. Thank you for that. And I did want to also mention that we all have experiences with the toxic masculine and toxic feminine, regardless of what sex we are. And what we would really like to hear tonight, and we'll share some as well, we just don't like to take up time that could be had by the group. What we would really like to hear tonight is the aspects of the toxic masculine and the toxic feminine that have really affected your life. And that could be someone else projecting that onto you. You had a toxic masculine father or a toxic feminine mother, or ways that you levied yourself to those around you. So you had this toxic masculine, energy, or you gave off toxic feminine energy. Either way is perfectly valid. And, you know, Jay's always like, he always wants to balance everything off with the light. So if you'd like to share anything to balance that out, then that's awesome too. But the invitation is to give us all a place to really talk about the toxic aspects of this masculine and feminine energy that we've all had to struggle with, no matter who we are. Make sense? Mm-hmm. Awesome. He's already in with his blindfold. Awesome. Tell us your name and tell us off the top of your head anything you can that has been a struggle for you with toxic masculinity or femininity.
My name's Dizzy. I first want to welcome the feeling of anxiety. Welcome heart beating fast. I welcome busy, loud thoughts. I want to welcome judging. I want to welcome breathing. I want to welcome compassion. And I want to welcome ease. I wasn't sure if I wanted to come up here. But when Satek gave me the wave to come over, I felt like it would be the best way to care for myself.
Mm.
And sit with challenging emotions. Welcome them in.
We can ask you a question, but I would love for you to continue if you have more to share. I'm really digging it. I'm really digging it.
I appreciate that. I want to welcome patience. I want to welcome gentleness. I'm not sure where I'm going, but I know there is no wrong or right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just nice to be reminded.
Appreciate you being up there, brother.
Mm.
Very brave, brother. And the topic is always just a suggestion. So if there's something else that is on your heart or your body to share, we can always talk about something else as well. Would you like a question on the topic, or would you like to talk about something else? Deep breath.
I'm trying to practice giving myself more space, and taking that sacred pause to really feel what my body wants. I feel like sometimes I don't give it the respect that it deserves.
How does it feel when you do give it respect?
I feel held.
Mm-hmm.
I feel supported.
Mm.
And I feel feel my heart open more towards love.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. That's a good reason to take that space. And I'm proud of you being willing to take that space right now. And I'm proud of you being willing to get up there, and everybody else here is proud of you as well. Would you like more questions, or is that enough for you for right now?
Hmm. I think I would like a question.
Nice. Do you have one, Jay, or should I go?
I've got one. Dizzy, what can you share with us of the negative aspects that feminine energy has played in your development?
Or masculine?
Could be either, but I was leaning into the feminine. I'd like to invite you to think less and say the first thing right now that you can bring to your lips.
Constriction?
Well, sorry?
Constriction.
Constriction.
Yeah.
Constriction. Now expand on that.
I could feel him thinking about everyone's perception of whatever he says. And then you're telling him to think less. That's the constriction. At least that's my interpretation. Please tell us yours.
I think I'm done now.
Thank you, brother, for coming up.
Thank you so much.
Very proud of you. Very proud of you.
Sharam, what do you got back
I
there?
just have a comment. I love you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you,
Rounds of
Sharam.
love for Dizzy.
Hugs. Hugs. Nice, dude. So proud of you.
I will be honest. That might be one of the most powerful shares of the least amount of words I've ever experienced.
Totally.
So,
Totally.
I'll just share. You like walked me through releasing a lot of anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
That whole time.
Mm-hmm.
It was powerful.
How he was talking to himself
Yeah.
and the invitation, that was beautiful.
It really was.
It's one of the most shamanic shares we've ever had in a soul sauce. Thank you, brother. That was very deep. Thank you. All right.
love it. All right, who's gaining some inspiration from that?
I know it almost convinced me, but no, I think I just wanted to.
You gonna pass?
Dane's got his hand up. Why don't you step up here, buddy?
Come on, bud.
I want to volunteer my services because I am a relatively empty vessel when it comes to these concepts. I figure that would be. I figure that would give us the most honest test case here.
That's a beautiful statement. And my first question is what does that mean? I want to know what that statement means.
Oh, just in terms of thinking about it, like I never really thought about any of these sorts of things or about the gendered and energetic components of emotional states or traits or anything like that. So that's why I'm like, yeah, this would be I'm a good test case for this sort of thing.
Perfect. Tell us your name and then share anything that feels natural to share about toxic, masculine or feminine.
You'll be the placebo effect.
Yeah,
exactly.
Perfect.
That's why I thought it'd be a good palate cleanser.
He's gonna set the base.
Exactly. Well, I'm Dane, and thank you again for these sheets here. I thought these spelled it out really helpful. So let's think. So, and it just helped me, and I might have to cheat a little bit and just make sure I'm remembering everything correctly. So bear with me. But
Sure.
So based on the way that the concepts are laid out here, I think that I think we all exhibit all of these at some point. I think that's pretty fair to say. And the question is, do we lean more one way or the other, and in what, to what degrees, in what circumstances? And I'll try to answer both sets of questions of myself versus what has been inflicted upon me, because that was what Satek brought up. That is an important factor in one's development. So I think for myself, in looking at the way that these are defined, I think when I'm at my best, I tend to exhibit more of the positive masculine energy, which is a good thing. And then there are some aspects of the positive feminine that I think I have, and I think creativity is one of them. I'm wearing the boots that I painted myself, so that is the creativity in action right there. I think whenever I've slipped down into the toxic versions of either, it has depended upon whether it has come from a person who I had authority over or they had authority over me. And I think that's an important distinguishment to make, because when it's been someone that I either did or I felt like I had authority over, I've noticed that some of the toxic masculine traits come out, specifically like dominance, aggression, control, competitive, like confrontational, criticism, like those I've noticed can come out more in that context. But then when I haven't necessarily had power over someone or authority or whatever, or I didn't feel like it, or I felt powerless in the situation, that's where you got like the powerless, possibly codependency, neediness, that kind of stuff. That's when that has tended to come out. So I think we all have all of these in us. It just, different circumstances will bring out different things. But yeah, my experience when I want to get back to me at my best, which I think would be more of the positive masculine side. I want to get out of any situation in which I can experience either of the toxicities, as much as possible. But that's kind of me in my natural state. As far as what has been inflicted upon me growing up or in my adult life or whatever, so I think I've seen both toxic masculine and toxic feminine. I think that my mom was a very dominating person, so she was heavy in her toxic masculine mode. And then I've been in workplaces where they varied a lot. I've run the gamut of workplaces and degrees of functionality versus not. My current workplace is very male dominated and is very positive masculine in terms of its orientation, I think. I've been in other workplaces where it was either all female dominated or it was 50-50 roughly. And I've seen women that exhibited toxic masculine traits. I've seen ones that exhibited toxic feminine. I've run the gamut pretty much, almost all of which were dysfunctional, and that can be inflicted upon you to different degrees. And I had one workplace where the boss was a man and he had the toxic masculine traits. But I've run the gamut of it, and when you are a new hire, it definitely puts you in that powerless state. And so you're not able to feel like you can get out of the situation, and that definitely doesn't do much for your ability to ascend, out of that. But after having gotten friends that exhibit the positive feminine and the positive masculine, and a workplace that exhibits better qualities of that sort, it helps bring them out in you as well. And so once you're surrounded by more positivity, it helps guide you towards the best version of yourself, and you just find out what that is. And for me, it tends to skew more on the positive masculine side when I'm at my best, and I'm trying to always get back there more frequently.
Question.
Nice.
Yes.
Hold on. Is there anything that you can share? Were there any wounds created from the toxic masculine or toxic feminine in your life?
Yeah, a lot of them. So I think, again, my mom exhibited a lot of toxic masculine traits and was the main breadwinner of the family and that kind of stuff. And so that was very difficult to deal with. I've since come to some peace with it now, at least as far as she's concerned, because she has calmed down a lot in her older age. But that was a big source of wounding for a good long time. And then that got reflected in some of the like women that I would try to meet romantically, like they would react badly or whatever. And sometimes it came from one place and sometimes it came from another place. Like I've seen both ones that were more in their toxic masculine mode and the other ones that were more in their toxic feminine. It just depends. And then that kind of reinforced it a little bit. And that's been hard to shake, but I'm working on it. Have not really encountered a lot of I'm trying to think of like I think I've had male examples of those as well. It's just I think it's more that you're not really used to your mother being so dominating and so unable to give love in the way that you want. Not exactly the nurturer. Not that my dad really was either. Neither of them were. But I think my dad was a more dominating person too, but just not as much as my mom. So like he had a little bit of the feminine in there compared to her, but then again, my mom, when she wanted to be, she could also be very I'm cheating here. She could have nurturing aspects of her, and like especially nowadays that she's calmed down a lot, she can be more nurturing, more tender, more kind, more intuitive, that kind of thing, because she's so out of that world now. So sometimes it's age, sometimes it's maturity, but yeah, they're definitely there were certain wounds that it's more like when you see certain traits pop up in people, then it rubs you the wrong way. Or like when it came to like toxic feminine, there was one workplace I had where there were people who were like gossip mongers, and they were manipulative, or they were withholding of whatever. They weren't forthright, they were not friendly or whatever, and that definitely didn't help. I do think that is a thing also amongst people that are younger, because life hasn't kicked them in the ass enough to where they know, okay, do this, don't do that, and you'll get along better. So people are acting from a more wounded place, and therefore I've tried to look back on my past, and I've tried to see it through that lens, that I wasn't as mature, I wasn't as developed, I wasn't as aware of these things as I am now, and neither were they. And some of us never get there, and then there are those of us, like all of us here, that are actively trying to get there because we're mindful of it. But I've come a long way in that sense, because I think I used to live in a more wounded place, unaware, than I do now. But yeah, I mean, I think there's probably there are some residual wounds that still exist, but I'm trying to not let them control me so much.
Amen. Thank you. So I just want to say two things, and then you can go, Jay. Number one, thank you for calling attention to this specific element, and I would love to hear more about these kinds of specific elements tonight, because you mentioned gossiping, and that's specifically part of the toxic feminine, y'all. And that doesn't mean men don't gossip. They can too.
Of course.
But men tend to say shit to your face, whereas women tend to talk shit behind your back, So if we can start to call out those specific patterns, we'll all get a much clearer idea of what these toxic masculine and feminine characteristics are. And thank you for calling attention to the wounds of it, because the real value of us tapping in to these toxic traits is to see how they hurt us, because those wounds follow you in life and affect how you relate to other people as well as your own emotions. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Jay. Bravo, buddy. Okay. You were very specifically affected, I would say. It sounded like more prominently
by your mother
Mm-hmm.
and endured wounds.
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe the wounds as specifically as possible, and then how those wounds would naturally manifest themselves in a regular day occurrence?
Okay. I like that. It's detailed. I like that. Okay, so the way I've always described it to people is that so my mom was the breadwinner. My dad actually homeschooled us at a time when that was not really in vogue.
Mr. Mom.
They compared him to Mr. Mom, and it used to bug the crap out of him. Because it was maybe 10 years or so after that movie came out when he first started, and so it would always rankle him. And but he had a job before that. He was a high school English teacher. But it just made more sense relative to our concerns at the time and needs and that kind of stuff. But it was such that my mom had a very high stress job, and she would come home and take it out on my dad. My dad would sometimes take it out on me and my brother. My brother would sometimes take it out on me, which that got worse when he got into high school age. And then I had no one else to take it out on. So it like just collected inside of me. And that, that was extremely difficult because naturally you want, if you have bad feelings stored up, you want a way to get rid of them. And when you don't and it's not that this is good, because it's not, but like the classical way that people deal with it is they tend to bully someone who's underneath them. And when you don't have that, then it just collects, which again, bullying someone else is not the answer, but it's the most primitive way that people tend to deal with that sort of thing.
It rolls downhill.
Yeah, exactly. And
transference.
Yep. And so it collected all down inside of me for a long, long time. And it took like teenage years is when you're in your rebellious phase. And, that was the time when I really started to try to fight back and try to, stand up for myself more. The problem is I was too much in my weak self, my weak mode. I guess you could say like I skewed too much in the feminine side on both the positive and the negative, because I was trying to kind my way out of problems as well as be resentful and that kind of stuff, which that's not necessarily a good strategy. Then meanwhile, in other environments since then where I have felt accepted and free and that kind of stuff, then my natural inclination, I'm cheating again, my natural inclination is to do like logical, focused, support, stable, direction, discipline, capable, certain, inner strength, that kind of stuff. Like that's where I naturally gravitate to when I'm in an environment where I'm accepted and that sort of thing. But I do try to always keep some of the skills that I learned, like the understanding, kindness, that sort of stuff, on the feminine end of the spectrum. That's what I attempt to do. But yeah, it creates a wound because you're not living according to what is your natural proclivity. And you're dealing with someone who is not really in her natural state of mind either, or her natural proclivity. And I don't want to paint her overly black, or anything like that, because she couldn't. My mom can be extremely magnanimous and extremely generous and friendly and outgoing, and she has a big heart and things like that. So, and I've seen more of that side of her in her old age. Is just more of, she was very tempestuous, and that's why I value stability so much, and why I value things that you can really count on, because I've had a lot of instability when it comes to the emotions of people, and so I tend to place a lot of value in that. But it makes it to where then when you get out there in the real world away from your family, then you see people who behave in an arbitrary fashion, or they're needlessly exclusionary, or they're too deep in their toxic or masculine or feminine mode, to where it rubs off badly on you, and it puts you, I think it's bad enough when you're in your toxic mode of whatever we want to say, your gender identity, whatever, when you're pushed down into that territory, it's bad enough, but then when you're emphasizing more of the opposite trait, I think it messes with you even more. Yeah, it definitely, anything that is an echo of what I used to deal with, or like the past negative experiences of like maybe total strangers who didn't act anything like my mom or my dad or anything like that, some of their behavior stays with you for a while, of like when they were needlessly either gossipy or exclusionary or tyrannical or whatever the case may be, then that can stay with you. So, people that are stuck down in these modes, it does cause real damage, and that's why it's so imperative for us to be aware of where we want to get to and which side of ourselves we want to emphasize the most.
Fuck yeah. So number one, god damn, that was a good answer.
Very detailed answer.
That's a good answer, bro. Shit. And the one thing that I wanted to point out is he mentioned another specific here, and that was that he became a people pleaser.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a toxic feminine trait as well. And you give and you give and you give, but you can never make anybody else happy. So it's this endless drain. And that people pleasing archetype is very often the result of a toxic masculine or toxic feminine authority figure.
Yes.
That you then have to try and please them, whichever side that it's on. So thank you for calling attention to that.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have a question?
Well, I've worked very hard to try to get out of that, because it's a very unattractive trait.
Right on. Amen.
So,
what you got, buddy?
Yeah, so my question is, there was a lot of story between you and your mom.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of curious if you have forgiven your mom.
Yeah, we've come to terms with a lot of things, and here's the thing, though: this is where it gets crazy, because now that I'm at this age, where I do have a good job that's very stable, and I do well at it, I'm well suited for it, and I'm rewarded as a result. And I have good friends. I'll have a lot of things I didn't have at that critical age. Now that I have those things and I can gravitate more towards the positive end of the spectrum as much as possible, now the funny thing is I actually am acting more like her than I ever did before, because I tended to act more like my dad, and I still have a lot in common with my dad. I probably take after him more than not, because he was an intellectual. He was he read a lot. He was kind of a nerd. Loved the English language and that kind of stuff. But now that I'm in a more stable place, I'm starting to see more of the influence that my mom had. I'm seeing that come out of me more, especially when I'm at work, because I'm having a lot of the positive qualities that she had, where you come up with ideas that will benefit the company, and you're assertive in your ideas. You trust your intuition more. You get along with your colleagues and try to find ways to make them succeed and stuff like that. She was great at that. When she was at work, she was at her best. And now that I'm at a place where I can thrive, that part of me has come out, as well as then some of the not so good aspects of, like, she could be kind of bombastic. She could, be a bit more of like, just get angrier at things that she thought were nonsense or whatever. I've seen that come. I mean, I always kind of had that in me, but I've seen that come out a lot more demonstrably now, so I have to watch that. But I have forgiven her a lot because I see just how much like her I am, and a lot of it is I'm realizing just how much good she has in her that did plant seeds in me that are coming out now. So yeah, I've forgiven her about a lot of things.
Nice. Anybody else? Jillica, you had one.
Okay, I'll ask because it was kind of similar. How do you think that's influenced your need to control your life or flow with your life?
Very good question. So that's something I struggle with now, actually, is wanting a lot of control over my life. And I know that the answer is you have to flow with it more, because there's a lot of elements that are going to come at you that you cannot predict, you cannot control, and you have to be okay with that. You know, and I tend to be a very like order centric person. I'm not really in the chaos. You know how some people are order minded and chaos minded. I'm not really very chaos minded at all, if I can help it. But the downside of that is that you do become overly rigid and you want to control too much of your life when there's very little that any of us can really control. So I do tend to be a little obsessed with controlling myself, my environment, how others perceive me, that kind of stuff, and how I can maximize my effectiveness and that kind of stuff. So, you know, that's something I'm working on. It is tough especially when you've spent most of your life not having any kind of control, and it's been very negatively impacting you. So,
Oh, you seesawed from one side to the other.
yeah, well, no, I always wanted control, even because I knew what it was like to not have it. But it's a fear now of, and not that none of us have real control over our lives. There's so many factors that directly affect us that nobody can control. You know, like we could get run over by a bus right now. We couldn't control that. But you know, it's more of like I do just have this almost obsessive need to control some things, and it can be counterproductive, and I'm fully confessed to that. But it's something that I'm trying to get better at, and just trying to the biggest thing that I struggle with, and Holly knows this, she gets at me all the time, and rightfully so, gets at me all the time, is trusting. You know, trust that the universe will provide for you what is best for you at the right time, and that kind of stuff. And it's always been hard for me because, again, the people and forces that you are supposed to trust, when they're not there for you, then that makes it a hard thing to conceptualize. But I'm trying. I'm banging away at that, you know, chiseling away at that block of marble so I can get the statue. But you know, it's very, I know how important it is. It's extremely important to be able to trust and not relinquish some measures of control, you know.
One little follow-up.
Yeah.
When you do become aware of yourself having this obsessive need for control or shirking of trust of other people, do you have a recent story of maybe when you caught yourself midstream and were able to make a conscious adjustment?
Let me think about that. That's a good question. I think I've gotten more successful at that recently when it comes to well, a lot of it was, I'm trying to think if this answers the question, because I've had incidents recently where like something from the past in which I felt very out of control, where that came up, and I tried to, you know, just let the feelings pass, and that helped a lot. But as far as, I think mostly I have a hard time answering that because at this point I don't really have a lot of people underneath me that I could control in that way. We are having some new people come into the company, one of whom will shadow me very closely. So that's going to be an opportunity for me to make sure that I am as resourceful and helpful as possible. And not that I think I would micromanage them, but it's like, it's going to be the ultimate test is what I'm trying to say. Because that's part of my issue is I don't really have a lot of means by which I could do that. But when I have had recent times where I've tried to get people to move a certain way and they didn't, that's where I got very frustrated, and I got very like wanting to dominate and be confrontational and that kind of stuff. And as far as stopping midstream, I think just maybe trying to just curb. I think I operate with a lot of internal restraint, probably too much, because like left up to my own devices, I would be a lot more outwardly rageful than I am. You know, I'm a very controlled person, so.
Awesome. Thank you, brother.
Thank you, Dane. Appreciate you, buddy.
Great work.
Thank you.
Love it, love it.
Oh, you're making massive strides every day.
Certainly
All right, do we have another brave volunteer?
Oh.
Connor's up. Let's see it.
Booyah, booyah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Connor,
Yes,
for
sir.
stepping up. We appreciate
sir.
you and everything that's about to happen.
I do not know what's going to happen.
I want to hear about this eclipse thing.
We never do.
Oh,
We never
yeah. Okay.
Not gonna let you get away with that.
do. All right, tell us your name and anything that feels relevant to share off the top about masculine toxicity or feminine toxicity.
Yeah, so my name is Connor, and before I answer that question, I just wanted to tell you, there was like a visual that came to mind when we were talking about control, and I'm just like imagining myself in this like raging river, holding onto a log, facing the stream of water, and it's all just like coming into my face. It's absolute chaos. I'm just like holding on for dear life out of fear. And sometimes when that happens, it's just, you know, this terrible experience. But when you turn and you let go and you actually turn around and go with the flow of the universe, it's just so calm. So I
Yeah,
was just
amen.
thinking about that.
Amen.
That's a great visual.
But I think, you know, when I'm thinking about masculinity and femininity, like I had a very similar situation growing up with the mothers mostly masculine, maybe to the wounded masculine sort of degree, and some role reversal growing up in the household. And throughout school, I was in a very gifted program, which happened to be, sadly, like 90% men. And I was one of the only people who couldn't play sports, one of the only people who couldn't, like, who wasn't like popular or even able to communicate very well. And so I assumed a lot of the feminine roles. Yet for most of my life, I think I was just kind of, people were dumping that onto me in a very similar way. And it's interesting because fast forward to now, I'm actually more of the wounded masculine is kind of where my challenge has come out. And I work in a company that we started together, Jillica and I, and she is the boss. She is the one who started everything. And so I've seen now how I've gone from being the wounded feminine around other masculine forces that were stronger than me to becoming that, well, I guess it would be a wounded masculine, would it? Wounding sort of the feminine energy. And I've seen how even in myself, how the wounded feminine has wounded the masculine that I'm trying to grow into, and how that's spreading to other people as well. So it's very interesting how wounds create wounds and they bounce between feminine and masculine, but really there's no way to ascend without internalizing that process within each category.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Are there any examples you can give us of these feminine or masculine wounds?
Yeah, I think our more recent example is that there are a lot of people who I work with who are women, and there's a lot of sort of feminine potential, very positive feminine energies there. And I think this happens in many workplaces, so I'm not saying that this is a unique thing, but a lot of times the men in the toxic masculine forces can kind of bring those feminine energies down to the point where there are a lot of women in the workplace who have to assume the masculine energy to be heard. And then at the very same time, that wounded feminine can also come about and create a lot of politics and a lot of challenges that sometimes go far deeper without meeting the eye. And recently, a lot of that has kind of come up for me in our sort of workplace environment, and I realized that ultimately a large part of it came from me, from being the toxic masculine. And it's just been very very challenging recently because, oh, they'll say since the eclipse we had to downsize our team, and there were a lot of energies that I was hoping would be able to be salvaged and restored, and unfortunately we ran out of time to do that. And so I do feel very bad and guilty that my worst version of myself has kind of created that sort of situation that's affected others.
Can you give us an example of your toxic masculinity?
I mean, the best example is creating a space where I talk too much, too loudly, or interrupt others.
That's toxic masculine.
And I'm not always, or haven't always been aware of it for so long, for at least a year or two. It's sort of jaded others around me to the point where they have to feel very like vicious to get a word in, which doesn't feel good. And it resulted in a situation where no one really trusted anyone. And that's because sort of the toxic femininity began to spread as the result of the toxic masculinity.
All right. The
There's
gossip
often-
behind your back.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
often the counterbalance. It's karma.
Yeah, it's the one energy equally reciprocating to the other. When did you first become aware of this particular layer of your own toxic masculinity?
Well, I think I became aware of it for the first time working alongside supporting, a woman that I cared very deeply about, and realizing in subtle ways how, the softer voices oftentimes, it's easy when you're are brought up in a world where you have to be strong or assertive as a leader, and you look at battlefield generals out on the front with armor and fanfare and stuff like that. But I think the idea of a positive feminine leader is something that most of us growing up don't really understand. And so I didn't understand that, and I didn't understand that the space that was needed to foster that would really require me to create that space, because unlike a strong masculine leader who's going to create the space themselves, a strong feminine leader may not do that, and instead may surround themselves with others who naturally give them the space.
That's deep. That's deep, and the idea that the positive masculine has to protect the sacred feminine. That's powerful.
Exactly, yeah. And
Powerful.
yeah.
Any other questions,
Jellica?
How do you think you can embody the positive feminine in your life?
Good question.
Unconditional love, nurturing, tenderness, intuitive, creative, stillness, flow.
I think I have to let go of the log.
Yeah, nice. That's a good beginning.
Wow.
Flow is feminine. Y'all holding on is masculine. And what do you think will happen in your life if you let go of the log?
I honestly don't know, and I think that's the beauty of it. I think what I do know is that I won't be going against the flow of the universe, which is a fight that you'll never win.
Can you imagine a version of yourself that knows how to listen rather than speak?
I can. I see that version of myself, and I appreciate that version of myself.
That'll help.
Sometimes I don't notice when I'm straying away until it kind of reflects in some level of consequence.
Right, reaction.
Yeah, it's gotten to be smaller and smaller. Before it was worlds on fire consequences for me to realize.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's smaller inconveniences from others.
You were kind of dense before, and now you're getting more smart about it.
Yeah, but not, it doesn't
Nice.
come naturally to me,
Nice. Can you envision a version of you with empathy that is able to feel what others are feeling?
That's an interesting question. Yes, but not for the reason you think, because I realized I don't actually know now what I would classify myself as before I first experienced love, like true, like romantic love. And after experiencing that, it kind of like awoke me to this idea of really deeply feeling and understanding that there is this whole like world and spirituality and so much more to connecting with oneself. But when I first understood it, I thought I was connecting with another person that I deeply cared about, and I would almost connect with them in that way, but I would never connect with myself in that way. And so, but then the problem with that was, as soon as that sort of ended, it kind of brought out the absolute worst amounts of, that had all the codependency and all of the manipulation on my side. And then after leaving, it became all of the control and all of the other pieces to that. And then ultimately, that's why you can never depend on others, I think, for your own journey. Because you have to see that in yourself to rise.
Empowerment. Amen. Love it. Love it. Any other questions? I've got a follow-up from Jillica's posed question of how you can embody more of the feminine energy in daily exchanges with people. And that is, can you ask more questions in conversations than making more statements? And first of all, can you? And what does that look like to you?
Yeah, I can, and I have, and sometimes people think I'm silly. I remember when I first met Jillica's parents, how we were in a small part of India, small town, and they have a lot of folks who kind of like chauffeur you around and stuff. And I was asking one of the rice field farmers what his dream was, and everyone thought that was just a ridiculous thing to ask. So I know I have that, and I've had so many parts of my life where I really lean into that. I think I lose touch with that sometimes when I'm holding on to my own train of thought and my own agenda, and that control comes out of fear of unknown. And it's almost like I'm afraid that if I'm not in control, things won't go in the right way. So it's exactly coming back to trust of the universe, in the sense that if I trust, then I'm okay to listen without getting stuck on against the stream of my own thoughts.
Totally. So almost everybody nowadays is dealing with social anxiety, right? So we're not alone anymore. There used to be a small group that dealt with it, but it's like everybody now. And I want everyone to know there's a really simple solution to it. And it's getting out of your own head and becoming interested in other people. Like, all of us are good at connecting and talking about shit when people just are interested in us, right? When someone just asks us questions, we're all good at talking about whatever the fuck our fixation is, right? But the key is to shift that and go, what can I figure out about someone else? And to really start asking genuine and deep questions. And then people start really enjoying and opening up and talking about themselves. And that's a key that bridges that gap for a lot of us that tend to be so obsessed with whatever's going on inside of our own minds. So thank you for drawing attention to that.
I think on that point is like, for me, it's almost like everyone wants to learn, but sometimes we're so concerned about our insecurities that we don't realize it.
I was about to say, one of the keys for asking these questions
in a conversation, maybe with coworkers, in a romantic relationship, with anybody on the street, in any sort of situation, is to then genuinely listen and honestly hear the answer, rather than just okay, pretending like you were interested in asking the question, but then not giving a fuck about the answer.
There is a difference to actually pay attention to the answer, because when you pay attention to the answer, then you get more questions and it takes you deeper. When you don't really, then you have to figure out another question, and then it gets weird because it's just random, where it's like what we really want to do is dig deeper into whatever it is that we're talking about, So good point.
It's like a flow chart.
Totally. Anybody else? Question?
Kind of piggybacking off of what was said just now, so when I did an interview, this was when I was really early in my working life. I was still new to interviewing, and the guy who was coaching me was saying that I kind of looked like I was ready, kind of waiting for my turn to talk instead of really listening. So that was something I eventually had to learn. But then piggybacking on what you had said earlier, the talking over someone or interrupting or whatever, that being part of the toxic masculine trait. I found myself doing that a lot the last couple of years, and then this year I made it a point to, and this is where it is helpful for you, the mantra that I have in my head is talk less, listen more. And I try to say that a lot to myself, and I found that it has helped whenever I've done that. So that's something that I think, as far as toning down that part of yourself and then getting towards some of the positive feminine that you're feeling like you're lacking, as far as the being able to connect and be tender and that kind of, and understanding that might be just a simple mantra to keep in mind.
Thank you. And I realized I may have interrupted you, Jason, very minorly, and just sitting with that, I want to apologize.
My positive femininity accepts.
Love it. Anybody else? Thank you, brother. Good job. Oh, you're ready. Let's do it. Oh, okay. Either of you. You won't regret it.
Not that I'll be able to tell.
All right. Tell us your name and anything that feels important off the bat about toxic masculinity or femininity in your life.
Okay, so I'm Lara. I'm also called Sunshine for those people who cannot pronounce Lara.
That's such a hippie name. I love it.
It's right on. So, I believe I had a lot of both in my childhood. There was a lot of tension and fight within both of my parents. They were both Taurus and both displayed toxic of both. And then my dad, I was his favorite, so I got glimpses of his positive masculinity, but that was such a conflict because then I would witness the toxic. So I also had grief enter in early on in my life. At 17, my dad took his last breaths, and that was probably where the volume went up on my toxic masculinity, because what he did give me from the positive side, I then drew within myself and felt like I was then forced into filling those holes, those wounds, so to speak. Although I had no idea that was what was going on. I was just barreling through grief and trauma. And my mom is, most people would love her when they first meet her. Behind closed doors, it is the opposite. She displays a very outgoing, positive, caring, church-going, religious woman, and then behind closed doors, I would put all my life savings and everything I have on the fact that she has never understood what love is for herself. So that was really hard, because she took out those feelings of anger on me. I think a lot of that was because of the resentment watching my dad love me so much, and me bringing out the positive in him. I think that was hard for her to see. And I didn't succumb to a lot of her wishes as far as not being a secure feminine. So she didn't like emotion, she didn't like, friendliness unless it was within her terms. So she liked gossip, I didn't, those types of things. And so there was always conflict there, and I struggled with that. I mean, I struggle with that my entire experience here. And I think realizing how much of that wasn't my fault helped me start to understand that I could make my own choices and I could define those things myself, and I didn't necessarily have to continue being under that sort of negative scope or spear or whatever it is she morphed into that day. So yeah, that's
Beautiful. Can you tell us any particular effects that you witnessed in your life from these toxic masculine and feminine influences?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for most of my experience, once my dad was gone into probably my early 30s, I abused myself. And that's what I attracted. That's what I allowed for all the other people in my life, was to further abuse me. And I set that standard for myself and allowed it. So it was just like a magnet to attract all of that kind of energy. And what really like rang true to me was chaos. Chaos felt normal. It was peace that felt so foreign. So yeah, I mean, basically my entire life experience, a lot of the things I did, even so much as, I was very successful in corporate America and school and put myself through it and had 3 jobs, and I just barreled through life. But again, behind closed doors, it was pure chaos. Nobody would know, but yeah, I would say most of my experiences were because of that energy that existed for so long.
Thank you for that. And it's very important to understand that when we have trauma, and we all have trauma, some part of us always seeks to recreate it. And we don't do that out of self-destructive desires. We do that because the body and mind know there's something here we haven't faced, we haven't processed. And so it keeps bringing this up so that we have the opportunity to make a different decision. Many of us don't, because the dysfunctional norm is comfortable. Your mind is more afraid of the unknown than it is of any known pain. And so your mind chooses the known pain over the unknown possibility over and over again. So thank you for addressing that directly. Thank you.
Sunshine.
Yes.
How did you specifically abuse yourself? And
how did that question?
And how did that manifest into your relationships?
So I would say it started with habits. I didn't really understand taking care of my body, so I didn't. Substances were definitely abused, from alcohol to various party drugs.
You can say it.
I've done just about everything except inject myself with a needle. I stayed away from the hard things that I labeled, but if I could snort it or put it under my tongue, I was down. I didn't love or honor my body, so I would find myself in sexual situations that I was just grossly uncomfortable with, but at the same time, that like gross uncomfortability fell in line with the chaos, so I rolled with it.
Thrilling?
Maybe in the moment. Afterwards, fuck no.
Right.
Fuck no.
Right.
And maybe the thrilling was more so what I had put under my tongue versus the person that was under my tongue. But
That's why people like the substances so much. It,
yeah, sure.
it lowers your bar.
It's numbing. And
Yeah, totally.
that was what I did to face the pain. You know, the pain of not having that safe space of my dad. Just, it was so easy to drink or to snort Adderall or Tylenol or whatever it was that somebody crushed up in front of me. Or
Tylenol.
Yeah, it's awful. Don't do it. It burns like hell. Burns worse than anything you'll ever put up there, except pixie sticks. That still burns the worst.
Connoisseur.
Yeah. So
a lot of things been in your nose.
Too many. The relationship side of that, I would say I just attracted those kind of people who looked for sunshine, that they could easily suck that, light and love that I gave, but also slip whatever under my tongue and then, have their way with some sunshine. So especially in romantic relationships, I sought my mom and went for people who talked to me and treated me like my mom did, which was not kind. Yeah, I think that answers your question.
It does very well. I want to acknowledge the power of you acknowledging your role in your victimhood. I feel a lot of power in that, and I would like to know what you learned from your victimhood.
So I don't identify as a victim anymore. And I think that was really, really important for me to recognize that maybe at one point in my life, a very long time ago, I was in fact a victim, but there was a certain point in my life where I got to choose to heal from those choices, and I don't look back on any of it and feel like a victim. I don't choose to use that terminology specifically because that gives my power away to that situation and to that abuser. And what I really found was forgiving my abusers and realizing that that's how they treat themselves. And it's really, really just a matter of them not having that balance of feminine and masculine energy or healing those wounds that they had. So yeah, I think when my perspective shifted to I'm not a fucking victim, I got to take my life back and really start to heal those wounds.
Oh man, hell yeah. What was your rock bottom?
Which one?
Was there the most rockiest bottom?
Shit, there's been a lot of rock bottoms. I would say the most recent rock bottom, I developed pulmonary embolisms on both my lungs. And for
what does that mean?
There's blood clots. Blood clots are pulmonary embolisms. So for a month, I fought basically for my life to figure out what was going on because, I was a young, healthy woman, so nothing was wrong with me. I was just crazy and pneumonia or whatever. And for a month, I fought for my life. And then as I was laying in that hospital bed, realizing for a month I had been living with these pulmonary embolisms that could have very easily killed me, I just had this total full circle moment, and I was totally by myself, which was good and bad. There was major duality happening of wow, I literally don't have anybody here to support me, but also I was yeah, because you put yourself here, you got to this point, nobody else has the ownership of this except you. And I had a conversation with my dad, and I was you know what, up until this point I have done a shit job of making you proud or really healing our family wounds, because I know I'm the only one who's going to do it. And I just took full ownership and said, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I'm going to fucking make you proud, and I'm going to make myself proud. And I just committed to that, and literally the past that was 2018, 2019. So these past few years, it's just been every day, how can I get a little bit better? 1% brighter. That's the sunshine motto, and it's true.
Oh,
I
that's
mean,
a t-shirt.
It's our community mission, and it's like grown to where I get to share that with hundreds of other women across the country. And it's like these past few years, me putting aside perfection and realizing progress is far more valuable, and just not like disowning anything that's happened to me, but disowning anything that I labeled myself or judged myself or victimized myself or assumed about myself before, and starting fresh every day and approaching it that way. I'm a whole different woman than I was laying in that hospital bed feeling like a victim, to bring it back to that aspect of it. So that was the most recent rock bottom, and probably the one that gave me the most value of, okay, enough rock bottoms. Let's really go after this every
like
day.
The last one.
Beautiful. And can you share with us any ways that these toxic masculine or feminine traits came out of you towards others?
Oh yeah, sure. I would say in relationships, that's what first comes to mind. In romantic relationships, I tend in the past, I tended to be very controlling and want to be in control of things and provide, because I would attract what my mom was, and in reality they were incapable of providing me what I was looking for. So I mean, yeah, it was just very toxic, really, until I became aware of what those things were and how they impacted me. I would say I was just a walking toxic masculine or feminine, and I would mirror what that person was. Like, ever since I was little, I've been very empathetic and could feel other people, and now I look at that as a gift, but for a long time it was manipulative. Like I would bring out some of those demons out of people just because I could.
Beautiful. Anybody questions?
Sure. Okay, Jillica.
I was just curious, how do you think you've now demonstrated the positive feminine and or masculine coming out of this?
Yeah, so I'm working on the positive masculine still. I struggle with that. I struggle with that balance. I wear a lot of hats because I work for myself, and I run an all women's community. So on the feminine side, I have fully dove in on the other end. I grew up and felt very unsupported by female energy, and I realized I can control that, and I can heal a lot of that by exuding what I needed that I didn't get. So I do my best to help women, especially those that I meet, that I identify with or connect with, and inspire them to work on that 1% brighter, because anybody can do that. Anybody can wrap their head around that. And if you do that over a certain amount of time and you have somebody holding you accountable to that, your whole life can change very quickly. So I have an all women's community where that's our mission. And so there's that in my life every day, all day now. And it feels like it's so much more of a blessing because I didn't have it for so long. And now there's an abundance and just a magnitude of it in my life. And it's like the duality is balancing out, and I'm so much more grateful for it because I can still go back to those dark places and remember what it feels like not to have it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
And what I heard in that, yo, and this is the invitation to every trauma, to every pain, is that she created her own fucking medicine. Do y'all feel that? That's the magic. That's the possibility of your trauma, of your pain. That's beautiful. Anybody else?
Sharam had one back there.
Yeah. Hi. So the one aspect that I really loved was your relationship with your dad. I was just kind of curious about like what qualities of your dad have you embedded within your sunshine?
Within my sunshine community, or like myself?
Yourself.
Myself. I feel like all of his good qualities, when he found out he was dying, I was the only one home left, and so for 9 months he basically lived that Tim McGraw song, "Live Like You Were Dying," and he gave me that. Like, he gave me that unconditional love and support and non-judgment. I mean, we read the 4 Agreements together, and for a long time I lost that, but now when I have a really good interaction with someone, or I have a really good, moment within the community or whatever it is, I feel like I am embodying his last 9 months, where he knew that time was so precious and he wasn't going to make it past those 9 months. So he lived in a way that most of us probably won't ever really live. But a lot of that was like his compassion and his curiosity. A lot of that came through when other people were talking. Like, that curiosity has always been within me, and he encouraged that so greatly. Like, he loved when I asked lots of questions, and he loved my curious nature, just like with nature or other things. So I genuinely try to be curious about people I meet, because I feel every single human being we interact with or meet can teach us something. And when I feel myself embodying that curiosity and that kindness and that basically like full presence in those last 9 months that he had, albeit very suffering filled, then I'm honoring him and doing the things that I feel like he would want me to reflect that he was.
Thank you. Yeah, beautiful. Oh, anybody else?
Dane. Well, first of all, congratulations on not seeing yourself as a victim anymore, because I can tell you that anytime that I've ever felt at my most unhappy, it was when I tried my hardest not to identify that way, but I know that I acted like it anyway. And any time that I've ever been the most unhappy, that's when that's been that way. So you getting out of that is a big win on your part. And so then coming out of that, do you think that, assuming that all of your needs are provided for, you're in your best possible state, do you think you would skew more on the side of the positive masculine or the positive feminine, or somewhere in the middle? Where do you think your ideal spot is?
I have definitely enjoyed in recent years healing my wounded feminine and embracing what I call my divine feminine energy. I'm fully embracing that, and I feel more authentic to that, but I do feel like my upbringing and my past has led me to be more masculine, because I had to sort of fill those roles and those holes myself. I guess I didn't have to. I chose to fill those roles and holes myself, and I feel like now I need to balance the seesaw, because the masculine is so much higher than the feminine, and so I'm very much enjoying bringing that feminine energy up, while not so much neglecting the masculine energy. But yeah, I would say a balance is obviously great, but I don't fully believe in true balance, so I think the feminine energy would definitely be a lot stronger.
Nice. I've got a question I asked a little earlier, and that is, when you do feel either the negative masculine or feminine energy coming out in a communication exchange with somebody, can you give an example of when you caught yourself and made a shift?
Yeah, every time I go on a date. Literally. Which one would you like? Which one would you like? So one came right to mind. I met up with a guy at a park to take a walk. He was 45 minutes late. He showed up and I smelled alcohol right away. He didn't put his dog on a leash, which I had shared with him. He needed to put his dog on a leash. So the dog aggressively like went towards a woman, and the woman was really scared. So it was like major test. And I found myself at first reacting in a very mirrored way, so aggressive and like angry. I felt that like boiling up within me. So I actually did some deep breathing and I reminded myself to like balance that out and to give him what he probably has never felt, which is like a healthy, divine, feminine energy.
Yeah.
And so rather than react in like an aggressive, like just shut down and the situation way, I actually like took a walk with him and just allowed him to release some of that energy. And I struggled the whole walk, but I just continued to go back to my breath and remind myself that like I controlled the situation. I could leave at any point, and that whatever was meant to happen was happening, and that I was there for a reason. So yeah, it was one of the hardest things I've done, but I think what I noticed was like at the beginning of the walk, he was extremely aggressive and like very toxic and angry. And by the end of the walk, which wasn't very long because I didn't make it very long, but he wasn't as aggressive and angry. And I was like, okay, this is good. You know, maybe not going to be another experience with this gentleman, but for the time being, there was a reason why we were together, and I felt really good about being able to deliver that, rather than in the past I would have just been like, fuck you, dude, get the fuck out of my space.
You held space for a human being and suffering rather than simply rejecting a partner.
Yes.
It's beautiful. Thank you. Anybody else? Thank you, dear.
You're welcome.
Amazing.
Sunshine, great job.
Amazing. Thank you. Who's next?
Who else would like to?
Come
All right,
on.
Holly, come right up.
Rock
I
it.
brought you down to the floor with
So my name is Holly, and I grew up with a very toxic masculine father. He was abusive and very, very controlling. So what that did to me was it made me grow up with a worthiness issue, not feeling good enough. And when I got older, I became the people pleaser, the self-abandoning person, and getting into codependent relationships with other toxic people. So that's how the toxic masculine wounded me. And so I went into, I guess, a wounded feminine, but I also have a wounded masculine in the sense of I can be emotionally volatile, and that was mirrored from my dad as well. And I had to learn to have better communication skills and get a hold over that emotional volatility.
Yeah.
Did you have any wounds from the toxic feminine?
I don't. Can you give me more of an example of how
you can look at the list again.
Yeah, cheat too. So that's okay.
You know, gossiping, bitchiness, hypersexuality, vindictiveness.
I don't think I've been very wounded by that.
Passive, overly passive to your own detriment.
Maybe my mother. Yeah. Yeah, she just let my dad be controlling. He got to control everything, So I don't think she ever spoke up or did anything.
Wallpaper.
She was a codependent person as well.
So you learned both of those roles.
Both, and I have both in me. I have actually gone into my masculine energy as for self-protection, because as a defense against not feeling good enough, I became an overachiever, and all that overachieving is kind of masculine energy, all activity just to kind of prove to myself that I'm good enough. But no matter what I achieved, it never did.
That's right.
And have you found any ways to begin to balance those toxic traits?
I do believe that I'm coming out of those. You know, my self-esteem is healing. I also had very low self-esteem from that situation, and over time, I have my last relationship was an abusive one, and just me getting out of that, I finally got the strength to just stand up and just kick the person out. You know, have boundaries. So in that way, my masculine energy actually helped me because I did learn to be assertive, boundaries, kick the person out. Um, and then just went on like a journey of just self-esteem, putting energy into myself. I did that for a few years before I ever got back into another relationship, and
What-
now I have a healthy one.
What was the straw that broke the back that made you assert yourself?
I had a back injury and I had a ruptured disc, and I couldn't walk, and I needed help, and just the way that he was still so mean and belligerent and all that when I was in such a state where I needed somebody. I don't know, something just made me snap.
Nice.
And I had him yelling and screaming and punching walls and stuff like that for the last time, and he did it one more time, and I literally got up and said, "You have 1 hour to get out of here. You know, I'm gonna leave, and if you're not out in an hour, the police will be here to make sure that you're out." And I was like, he was gone. He literally packed his stuff up and left, because when I do get in my masculine energy, I can actually be scary. And so I think that is that masculine energy has really been a self-protection mechanism for me. But now that I'm in a healthy relationship, I've had to tone that down and get back into my more divine feminine, the more understanding, compassionate, kind person.
Amen.
Because I have been, you know, issues with emotional volatility, and I've had to learn to communicate better. And like Sunshine was saying earlier, I believe that I healed that with divine feminine. So in the times that I wanted to be emotionally volatile, I instead decided to try to be kind and understanding of another person first, instead of just getting really defensive and volatile.
Are there any examples you can give us of the toxic femininity that has come out of you?
Yeah, like complete self-abandoning and just codependency. I can't believe, like when I look back on it, how much I took of that last relationship. I mean, I was in it for 7 years. I can't believe when I look back on it that I took that for just the scraps of love that was there. Just complete self-abandonment. I mean, no person who loves themselves would ever tolerate that behavior.
Do you know why you did?
I still don't know, really.
Thank you for the honesty.
I guess, you know, I think there's an abandonment wound there too. And, you know, somebody told me once that sometimes feeling abused is better than being abandoned to people who have an abandonment wound.
Totally. Yeah,
So-
that's very true. Totally. Abandonment is the deepest wound. It's worse than physical abuse. It's worse than sexual abuse. Babies will die without attention. Babies don't die because someone touches them. Even when you're together and being abused, it's still being together and not alone.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, so the pain of how he treated me wasn't as bad as the pain of having to leave and then watch him be with somebody else. And, you know, I also had controlling behavior issues as well. As far as toxic masculine, I had controlling volatile behaviors.
I love how clearly you see your patterns now. Feels very empowering.
And I'm in a healthy relationship now, and we've been together 5 years, but that took a lot of getting used to, because going to a healthy situation after I'm only used to toxic ones was a little difficult to get used to.
Can you explain why?
I'm not used to people really being loving and treating me like I matter. I just wasn't used to that. I don't. So I think I had trust issues at first that I had to overcome, and I didn't have any kind of healthy relationship modeling, so I had to learn all that as well. Learn better communication skills, and he's been a very loving partner, and that really helped me.
This is a very important thing to understand, is that when we are used to suffering, goodness feels very confusing. It feels very unstable. It feels frightening. It's very important. And if you need an analogy for it, imagine tying off your leg to cut off the circulation for 3 or 4 minutes. And then you untie it, and what happens? That shit hurts. But it's oxygen. Your body needs it, but it hasn't had it for a couple of minutes. And oxygen feels like pain. That's what goodness can feel like when we're used to suffering, when we're used to starving. Thank you for that.
And now that I've finally been able to feel safe and I can let more of my divine feminine energy out. Now it's safe to be in that energy.
How's that feel?
Really good.
Amen.
Holly, it sounds like you've had quite a journey. And if you were to teach somebody how to become where you're at right now, how would you teach them? How would you teach them to allow the feminine, the positive feminine and the positive masculine to flourish?
What's your advice?
One of the biggest things I learned is that we are always feeling our thoughts. So what helped me to heal the most is to realize that a lot of the bad feelings that I was feeling, it was just my thoughts. So, you know, as far as all that stuff I learned about unworthiness and low self-esteem and any kind of, I just learned to be able to listen to those thoughts and just know they're just thoughts. They're not real.
Love it.
Love it.
That's very big. That's valuable for a lot of people.
Anybody else?
If only there were some books you were reading recently that could help people do just that. What are those books?
Was that a real question?
Well, he did say it like a cartoon character, but it still has validity.
Just kind of amplify.
Yeah, I already knew this, but there is a book called "Don't Believe Everything You Think," and I recently read that, and it was a really, really good book with that concept.
You can post it up on the group invite too.
Do you think if you had known what a positive relationship actually felt like and looked like, would that have helped you?
Probably. Yeah, because I had no example of a healthy relationship growing up.
Do you feel like that adds value to you being in one now?
I created it myself from no example or anything. So yeah, I do feel so.
She made her own medicine too.
Yeah, I did.
So you weren't just copying something; you learned it and created it yourself.
Amen.
I became the things that I never had.
There you go.
That's true. I became a loving person. I became a kind person, a compassionate person. Those things that were never there for me. I became an emotionally supportive person to other people. I never had that.
Yeah.
That's the best example of what the spiritual journey is to become the things you believe you're missing. Thank you. Anybody else?
Thank you so much,
Thank
Holly.
you, dear. Anyone else? Before we finish up, I want to do a quick one, and then you can do a quick one as we do the wrap up. Cool. So, my life was filled with toxic masculine and toxic feminine. It seemed like everything in my life was one or the other. And my father was a fucking hardhead. He was stubborn as shit. And he didn't know how to relate to anyone without arguing or competing in something. And he was a gambler, and he was terrible. Never saw him win a fucking thing. And he would lose an entire paycheck over it, you know. And my mother was bipolar and hypersensitive and would lose her mind at the drop of a hat. And so I was surrounded by all of this like absurdity, you know, and my very first best friend. I've told both of these stories in the group before, but I've never told them together. My very first best friend, Adam, was the biggest narcissist I've ever known in my life, and I didn't know what a narcissist was at that time. And he's kind of how I figured it out. I figured out that I didn't like them, and I had to see the narcissist in me that I had learned from my father and from him and from other, you know, boys. I had to see it through him, and this motherfucker cheated on every girl he ever dated, and he fucked over every friend he ever had, and everybody loved him. He was like the coolest kid in the surfer boy, you know, skater kid. And so that was the beginning of my understanding of toxic masculine. Was this kid that was a year younger than me that would talk shit and make fun of me to my face when his older rich friend would come to the neighborhood to visit, you know. And just watching how he treated every girl in his life and how he treated his sweet little sister. Then one of my first girlfriends was my introduction to toxic femininity, and it was around 12, 13 years old. And she came over to his house and ended up cheating on me with him. And he put his fingers in my face and told me to smell and told me, you need to date that girl. You need to dump that girl. She's a slut. Like he was doing me a favor. And this was the beginning of my understanding of how men and women act. You know what I'm saying? So I was wounded in a lot of ways by toxic masculinity, and I was wounded in a lot of ways by toxic femininity. And I thank God so much that I was able to see these pains, these wounds, and the effects they created in my life. And I'm very proud to see that I've healed a whole lot of both of them. There's obviously still some speed bumps here and there, but I see the beauty of it, and I don't see myself as a victim either. I see how I chose these people in my life. I chose the people, and people treat us how we allow them to treat us, and I own that, and I've made new and different decisions in my life since then. And I truly see the wounded child in the masculine, in the toxic masculine, and I truly see the wounded child in the toxic feminine, and they're both reactions to the other, you know. And the answer is compassion, not judgment, not, you know, evil this, evil that. The answer is compassion. Everybody really just needs a hug, y'all. Thank you.
Hold it. Sit down.
Thoughts, questions?
Who's got questions? Who's got anything for Satek? What is a practical sort of practice that one can have to call in positive masculine and positive feminine to their life?
Great question. The simplest practice for balancing any energy is simply looking to the opposite end of the spectrum. So if you find yourself with the toxic masculine, me, what's the opposite? Other people, right? So wherever you're at, if you're at anger, then look for compassion. If you're at impatience, then shift your focus to patience. If you're at fear, shift your focus to trust or to love. Whatever that extremity is, search for the opposite and you will find the balance. And that's the key. It's not right or wrong. The key is to find the integration in between these two polar extremes. Thank you for the question. Anybody else? Thank you.
Angelica has one.
I'm curious. It's like you said that about being 12 that happened to you. Like
Mm-hmm.
that is so young.
Mm-hmm.
How did you like find light and like how did you cope with that, and how did you push yourself to be the best version through that when it's such a young scar?
Thank you. I wanted to beat my buddy up, but he was a year younger than me. And we had had a fight before, and it didn't make me feel any better to outpower a kid younger than me. And so I knew that wouldn't help. And I did end up breaking up with her. But I saw her pattern. She was working her way around the school, and she never stayed with anybody for more than a week or two. And so I couldn't blame her. Like, I was like, she's young and she's trying to explore herself and figure shit out, and I wasn't fast enough. I wasn't fast enough for her, and I couldn't blame her for that, so I didn't hold it against her. And my buddy Adam cheated on everybody and screwed over everybody, so I couldn't take that personally. That's just what he does. And I could see that it's from his wounds and his masculine and feminine. Like, his dad was Al Bundy and his mother was, I don't know, like Peg Bundy, maybe. I don't know. His mother was meaner than Peg Bundy. So I could see that his perspective on the world was based on his wounds as well. And my girlfriend's was totally based on her wounds, and she was deeply, abandoned. And then I saw the abandonment in my own life, and I saw the ego in my own life. And I realized that, like, holding grudges against people doesn't help you or them. Doesn't hurt you or them. And when you can see the underlying pain that leads people to their actions, it's much easier to forgive their actions. And when you allow yourself to forgive others, it's much easier to forgive yourself.
Did you have those thoughts that you're describing right now at 12, or did you realize those at a more mature age?
I was angry at Adam for a while, but we were still best friends for many years after that, and I never held Jamie's, infidelity against her. Like, I should have known better. Like, what you expect that you're going to be different than all these other,
and that was only an exhibit of her traumas as well.
Yeah. So, there was some pain there. There was some grief. There was some anger at him, but it didn't last long, and I stayed friends with both of them, So, but I grew up around a lot of trauma, a lot of shit, and so I had to learn how to deal with stuff, at a very, very young age, and those were just more examples of it. And it's been a very strange, interesting life, and I don't regret a single moment of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Connor's got one. Connor and then Holly.
Sautek, you were explaining this idea that if you can understand the wounded feminine and wounded masculine in others, that almost allows you to sort of disarm its effect on you. However, there have been some points tonight where others have talked about how accepting and forgiving others doesn't necessarily get you out of harm's way in their sphere of influence for the result of their actions. So how do you balance those two things?
Meaning, if I'm dating someone that's cheating on me, accepting that they're a cheater doesn't remove me from that behavior. Is that what you mean?
Correct.
Yeah, I see your question. Acceptance is a step that is typically taken in hindsight after the fact. It's not advisable to accept while you're being abused by your husband or your father or your girlfriend. Like, acceptance is not necessary there. What's necessary is to protect yourself. So there are stages to healing, and they come in a typically chronological order. And acceptance is the end of that healing process, not typically the beginning. Now, acceptance can work really well at the beginning if it's not a dangerous or, deeply, wounding experience. But if it's deeply wounding and you accept, that's how people get stuck in a pattern of being abused. Like, they just accept it,
And it's complacency.
Right. You and so many people people treat you how you allow them to, you know? So if someone's been abusing you for years, like, stop blaming it on them and start asking yourself, why do you put up with it? You know? And so acceptance is something that tends to come after the fact. And it's very, very important for healing, because it's the release of the feeling of being wronged. It's the release of that. And once you release the feeling that you've been wronged, it doesn't haunt you anymore. You know, like, it's not right that cheetahs eat baby gazelles, but that's what happens, you know? And the gazelles that get away, they just let go of it. They don't sit around smoking cigarettes talking to everybody about how they almost got eaten. you know what I'm saying? Like, you just let that shit go. Like, I'm alive, I'm here, thank God. You know, so did that answer your question?
It was very helpful.
Awesome.
Oh, hold it.
Oh, sorry. I'm trying to leave, cause we're like over it. I'm trying, like, I still want you to share too. Like,
Holly's got one.
Yeah, Santek said something that triggered in me my real answer. Because when you asked me what would I tell other people, I drew a blank.
Well,
So
that
was
great what you would tell other people.
Well, wasn't my real answer. That was my real.
Well, you gave us a good fake one there.
Yeah.
That's true, but what really did it is now what Santek is saying, that I realized that how people treat me has nothing to do with me. It's only to do with them. So it's like how they treat me says nothing about me. It just says they're the type of person that treats people that way. It's learning to separate the treatment from from anything about myself.
That's one of the 4 agreements. She mentioned 4 agreements, Don Miguel Ruiz, is that nothing is personal. Everything is about them. Nobody is doing anything because of you. It's all their story they're working out.
That's it. That was what helped me the most right here. So that's my real answer.
Awesome.
Love it. I think you have 2 real answers.
All right. Give us your take, and then you can wrap it up.
I already said the first thing that popped in my head, but no, that's the real answer.
My name is Jason Kearse, and I grew up in the typical American dysfunctional single-parent family household. And upon retrospect, I'm very good with it, because had my father at that time been around, it probably would have been worse. So my mom always said to me, I'm your father and your mother. And she was very proud of wearing both those hats. And I can very well see that she did provide a lot of love and nurturing, and also a lot of control and fear and dominance and emotional instability. So there was quite an exhibit of negative or toxic masculine and feminine energy kind of wrapped up into mom, that I very well absorbed. And in thinking about the subject, my mind goes bigger. My mind goes to basically the next layers of conditioning that I was subject to, and that was the movies and the music and the games and the people that I was around that created a predominantly toxic masculine environment for me to thrive in. Like, you know, the cartoons that I watched were Transformers, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, G.I. Joe, anything that was like of a warlike, combative nature, an overly competitive nature. And there's a whole lot more examples. Y'all know what I'm talking about. And so I really felt like, you know, especially from looking at my younger self from the perspective that I'm at now, like I was like soaked in war. I was soaked in like disgusting, toxic masculinity.
And that would come through me and then come blasting out at my brother, where I needed to dominate him and I needed to belittle him and make him be the butt of all my jokes. And then because I was more outgoing and popular than my friends at school, we were only 1 year apart. So my friends felt like that was like a big open invitation for them to pile on him as well too. And so I realized that I have been steeped in disgusting toxic masculinity, but not before I joined the military. Where then I was just exposed to more cycles of it, and people both being taken advantage of within the system, and people taking advantage of others within the system. And I was witness to it, and it was around those times that I created greater senses of awareness around what this toxic masculinity was, and how it was abusive, and how it was over controlling and warlike and dominant, and the negative aspects of the dark sides of humanity. And having seen that, I wanted the other side. I wanted to explore and learn the other side. I wanted to understand spirituality. I wanted to understand why it is. I wanted to understand religions, and I had a big open mind to start wanting to just understand these different layers of society, and how they've affected me, and how I keep cycling them back around. So I would say from those points, I have greatly developed my own positive femininity. I genuinely ask a lot of questions, curious to the answers. And I genuinely love to interact with people and find out what's going on with them, and hear their responses, and offer kindness and love and compassion. And I really feel like this element of the positive femininity is what I am really enjoying to work on more, and expanding more of my life. And I see just how powerful sharing love is, more so, way more so, than creating conflict and dissent.
Amen. Anybody got a question?
What's your relationship like now with your mom and your brother?
My relationship now with my mom is the best it's ever been. When I was younger and living in her house, it was just toxic all over the place. Now, and there is periods of big love exchange. We did love. We had great exchanges of love. But then there was great exchanges of emotional instability and control. And since leaving the Navy, since being thrown out of the Navy, and having gone through alcohol rehabilitation within the Navy, and learning how it is that, to a great degree, that I do the things that I do, and why, and what has affected me, or what has created those wounds in my younger self, and how then to move beyond them, and then share those kinds of conversations with my mom, has been amazing. And I love it. And we talk regularly, and since she got a smartphone a couple of years ago for the first time in her life, she's amazed to see pictures and videos just coming through the phone, and we have great conversations like that and share lots of stuff. The relationship I have with my brother is very sparse. And 2 weeks ago, I was a part of a very influential plant-based medicine ceremony on my life, influential on my life, and the way that I see my brother and see the people around me as guides, and how to move beyond that and learn. And he knows some of the things that I've been going through, but he's still just on the periphery, just kind of looking in, trying to figure out, like he knows and feels that I'm healing, and I want to talk about it and bring it to others' awareness, but he's not ready for any of that.
Mm-hmm.
Like for him to talk about his childhood traumas would, in his mind at this time, I feel like, be reliving the traumas that he's trying to forget, rather than allowing the acceptance of them, for them to totally release their power. So the power that those traumas still have with or of him are deeply subconsciously rooted, rather than him allowing any acceptance of them to release their power. We have just recently had a long Facebook exchange of ideas, and he likes to think that he's very political in nature, when it's really just a resonance of negative energy. And I have caught myself wanting to respond to him in some of my old patterns of wanting to dominate and belittle, but then I was like, oh shit, no, I'm gonna erase that, and I'm just gonna send a loving message. So he's my guide. He's one of my guides for allowing me to reflect back on what would my old self have done compared to what my new loving, nurturing, positive femininity would do. And it was beautiful for me to realize that and understand that and go through it. Thank you for asking.
I got one.
Yeah.
So we're already over, so this could be opening a can of worms, but just give us the short version. Tell us either direction, what was the worst toxic masculinity experience that was levied upon you, or what's the worst that you levied upon someone else?
I remember getting in a fight with a kid. Well, it was my friends and some other group of kids' friends that were in a fight, and my friend started the fight because that's the kind of friends I had. We wanted to go fight. And this was like stupid high school shit, or even junior and high school. And the kid on the other side, one of the kids on the other side, was beating my friend up, and I could see it. And I stepped up to him, and with all my fucking might, I kicked him right in the face like I was punting a football.
No.
Like, after that, I knew he had to be fucked up bad. And it hurt me. It hurt me that I knew that he was probably fucked up as bad as I thought he was. Because that ended everything. As soon as I did that, everything ended, and they had to leave. And I felt massively, massively terrible inside, while at the same time receiving praise from my friends that I fucked that kid up.
Hella confusing. Thank you, brother. That was deep. Thank you. Anybody else? I love that you went to something you did too instead of something was done to you. That was powerful. All right, you can wrap us up, brother.
Oh, did something funny happen? Okay. All right. Well, let's just give a round of hippie applause to everybody for coming tonight, sharing and receiving. Even if you didn't share, you were still receiving. I felt quite a bit, and maybe you'll be inspired at another event to share some of these stories of healing and moving beyond. So this is spiritual expansion. And within spiritual expansion, we have different formats. The format that we experienced tonight is called Soul Sauce, where we have a topic of the evening and we do this. This is also a satellite little mini station of Big Love Yoga Barn that we are collecting donations for, normal digital donations, PayPal, Venmo, Zelle, Cash App. Cash is great too. And those donations go to help the relocation fund of Big Love Yoga Barn. We're going to be moving locations in later this year. And there's a lot of work and a lot of money and time and effort and energy that is going to go into that transition. So finances are great when you can help out. Please donate generously. Some of that money goes to the relocation fund as well as your facilitators of the evening.